Hi, long time no see. Sorry for never updating you on whether or not I got a job. And furthermore, sorry for never updating you about my life. A lot of crazy stuff happened last year. So here we are. Um, I am in school. That is something fun. And I'm currently taking a communications class, and it's called Intro to Speech, I think. And essentially, I wrote a speech, and I actually really liked it, and I would like to share it with you guys today because I think it might help. It's something that's very near and dear to my heart, and I hope that it helps. And if it doesn't help, that's fine. Maybe it will just be nice to kind of hear about an experience that I went through. Um, but the purpose of this speech is to ensure those that are afraid of getting health diagnoses that it is okay and that it is going to be okay. Okay, so here we go. Raise your hand if you have ever been afraid to address a health issue. Now, if you're like me, back in 2020, you are raising your hand, you are jumping up from the seat, you are screaming that nothing is wrong and everything's fine and to just leave me alone. Back in 2020, my daughter Elle was around 18 months old, and she had absolutely no words in her vocabulary. For those of you that don't know, in speech, you are actually supposed to have 150 words in your vocabulary by the time you are 1 year old, with that doubling in size by the time you are 2 years old. So we reached out to the pediatrician. And when I went to the pediatrician, I fully expected him to say, "You're fine, you're just being a worrying mother." At worst, he was going to say, "This is an issue of COVID because the kids aren't socializing as they should be." And unfortunately, that's not what the pediatrician said. The pediatrician alerted me that we needed to get early childhood intervention started right away through the regional center, and that he would give me a referral. And then he also said to brace ourselves for a autism diagnosis when my daughter turns 3. A quick caveat of that is that you actually can't be diagnosed with autism until you are 3 years of age, because toddler developmental milestones, although they seem very linear, unfortunately they're not. So you do have to wait until you're 3 to get an official autism diagnosis. But until then, you can use resources from the regional center in order to get any sort of early childhood intervention that you may want or need. So when he told me this, I immediately kind of freaked out and I spiraled because I had been a paraeducator in a past life, but also in this life. I had been a paraeducator and a volunteer for schools with special needs students in classrooms. And I also, some of my own family members do have autism. So I immediately became afraid of the stigma that I felt some of these students had faced in their, high school and middle school careers. I also became afraid of the isolation that a lot of parents will actually complain about and tell paras that they have suffered. And to be frank, I was also incredibly afraid of the unknown. I didn't know whether or not my daughter would meet her milestones ever, or when she would meet those milestones. And it was really scary, and I did not know how to process it. So until she was 3, we did have her in various therapies ranging from physical therapy to play therapy and so on and so forth. And kind of during those meetings, I was a very active participant. I ensured that I was learning how they were interacting with Elle. But I was very against the label. I was very against the diagnosis itself. Um, I, they would say things like, oh, well, she doesn't play pretend. And I would say, well, that could be normal. Like, a lot of kids don't play pretend. Um, and I would almost beg them to kind of say, she doesn't have autism. She doesn't have this. It's just developmental delays. And obviously, none of the medical professionals would do that because that would be incredibly illegal and unethical. Also, they would kind of leave me with this advice, which is like, a diagnosis is not bad. At that time, I wasn't ready to hear that. I was too afraid. I was too in denial. But eventually that diagnostic appointment did come. And if you've seen any of my videos, I'm sure you are able to tell that my daughter has autism. The doctor was able to give us the level of autism, and he, left us with some really harsh truths about my daughter's current capabilities and where he thought she would be in the future. Although I don't agree with him diagnosing her capabilities in the future, because no one knows what you're capable of, and we will not be limited as a family. But, he did give us the diagnosis, and that diagnosis didn't shock me, but I did spiral for a little bit. From that spiral, though, and from the diagnosis, I was able to access resources and embrace a community that I had previously been so afraid to join. There were a few things that really helped me process the situation. I will put links to them below. One was a Sesame Street episode where the Muppets meet Julia, who is a Muppet with autism. It made me feel like it was going to be okay. Like, there is representation out there for children, and that my child will not be shunned just because of her differences. Additionally, there was a beautiful poem called Welcome to Holland that spoke lovingly about kind of the feelings that you go through when your child is diagnosed with any sort of special needs or disability. My daughter is bigger than her diagnosis, but this diagnosis has allowed and continues to allow us to access community, access legal protections, and it has given us an understanding of what Elle needs in order to succeed in everyday life, which is really exciting. So if you're going through this and you're at the early childhood intervention stage, or you're noticing that your child is not reaching certain milestones that you would expect them to, but you feel afraid to name it, you feel afraid to have a name for what you're experiencing, I just want to remind you and share with you that for our family, receiving a diagnosis has allowed us to kind of name what we're experiencing, and it's also allowed us to make sense of it. And that is a really powerful tool that seems small, but can give you so much agency while dealing with something that's rather scary, and not everyone else has experienced it. I hope this helps. And I will make more videos to talk about like my new job and stuff, but I ended up getting an A on this speech, and it was a lot shorter. But hopefully if anyone's watching this, it could be a helpful tip or maybe ease some of your fears. So thank you. Have a great day.